Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on personal branding for the modern job seeker. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce Miles Jennings, founder and CEO of Recruiter.com.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dana, for the introduction. Thank you all for being here. We're very excited today to partner with TopResume for this webinar. Amanda is a fantastic presenter, and she really knows her stuff. Their team at TopResume spent so much time in the career space. They're going to have all kinds of very good tips on how to land a new job, how to present yourself, and how to fix up your resume and online profiles. So we hope you get a lot out of this webinar. I'll be online during the webinar, seeing your questions, and I will try my best to help out there with some of your questions both during and after the webinar. So thank you so much again for joining us, and enjoy.
Thank you, Miles. Next, I would like to introduce Amanda Augustine. She is TopResume's career advice expert. She is a certified professional, career coach, and resume writer with over 10 years of experience in the recruiting industry, helping professionals improve their careers and find the right job sooner. Amanda?
Thanks so much, Dana. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, or if you're on the West Coast, good morning, and thanks so much for joining us. As Dana and Miles mentioned, my name is Amanda Augustine, and I'm the career advice expert for TopResume. TopResume is the largest resume writing service in the world. So if you're working on that resume or you're just starting your job search and you want to get a gut check if your resume is in the right direction, you can request a free review at any time by going to topresume.com. Something else I'd like to note, I'm going to go back a slide. If any of you are multitaskers or feel the need to have a phone in one hand and a computer in front of you on the other, please feel free to participate on Twitter. I have some tweets scheduled out. My team is also going to be live tweeting, but we're going to be using the hashtag #PlanYourBrand. So if there's something interesting that catches your eye, feel free to share it with that hashtag, or you can also follow along on Twitter by looking at that hashtag, and you can see everything that we're going to be sending out. On that note, let's get started. Hello. One thing I like to do when I'm starting a webinar is get a better sense of who's participating. So as I'm going through the material, I can try and customize what I'm saying to really make sense for who's on the call. So what I'd like to do is run a little poll. You're going to bear with me as I play with the polls here. And get ready. I'm going to be sending it out now. I would love to get a sense from everybody, what field are you in? And if you're just starting your career, what are you looking to do? Or even if you are trying to change careers entirely and go in a new direction, what is either your target field or what field are you currently in? And we're just going to do this until we get about 75% of you who have voted. Once we have that, I'm going to let it go. Just let me know where you're at. I understand they're very wide categories, but take a stab. All right, 3, 2, 1. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to share those results. So it looks like we have a split all over the place. Doesn't surprise me. Can everybody see the poll results? Beautiful. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so it looks like we've got a mix of a little bit of everything. What I find interesting is we've only got about 17% that are in the sales or marketing space. But if you're joining me for this webinar, my assumption is that you're looking to find a new job, or at least you're considering that. And in my mind, that makes you a marketer. Because the moment that you start a job search, you become a salesperson and a marketer. And you are going to be marketing the most important product or service you will ever have to sell in your entire life. And that is your candidacy. We're talking about what makes you uniquely you? What's your personal brand? And of course, that is really the point of today's webinar. Something I'm also going to throw out there, I am born and raised in the New York City area. I've only had one cup of coffee, I promise, but I know that I can speak very quickly at times. I also know, according to my mother, that I do not enunciate. So if I'm saying anything and you don't understand me, you want me to back up, or you have additional questions, please take advantage of that chat window and throw a message in there, and my team will give me big hands up that I need to slow down or back up on something. Okay, personal branding. What in the world does this term mean? You hear it everywhere. Everyone tells you it's important in today's job search. How in the world do you know what it is? Well, personal branding is not that different than a company that's branding its consumer brand. So if we're thinking about all these brands that are so well known, Apple, Nike, Google, McDonald's, I mean, these are all some big brands. There are a few things that all of these groups have in common when it comes to branding, and it very much applies to what I want you to think about when you're determining what's your personal brand and how you're going to advertise that to the world. First of all, when you think about it, they all have some sort of mission. They make it very clear what they're all about. And that's very similar to you as a job seeker, because that's focusing on what's your goal. What are you ultimately looking to do, if not in your next immediate job, in the long term for your career path? What are the benefits of their products and their services? And for you, that's your qualifications. What have you done, or what skills have you gained that make you an attractive candidate for whatever you're going after? What's the differentiation? There are plenty of companies out there that provide MP3 players and music and computers and phones, and yet we very much know the difference between Apple and Samsung. So why is that? Because they figured out a way to think about what's unique about them and how are they going to differentiate their brand versus everyone else who's doing the same thing in the same space. And that's a lot of what I want you to think about when you're sitting there going, what is my brand and what makes me different than others? And a lot of that comes down to, what are your core values? What do you stand for? Why are you passionate about what you do? What makes you incredibly qualified for what you're doing? And it's beyond just the technical skills, it's the unique abilities that make you you. And you want to think about that, and also think about what are you learning from your friends, your family, and your colleagues. That ask them, you know, when you think of me, what's the first word that pops into your mind? And that's going to help you figure that out. And then, not most important, but one of the most important things out there, their brands are consistent across channels. If you see a print ad, a TV commercial, something pops up in your LinkedIn feed or your Facebook feed, and you know every single one of those when it's from Nike. You see an ad in a magazine, a commercial on TV, you know when they're for Target. They just have a very clearly defined brand. It's consistent. It's not always identical, but it's consistent. It has the same feeling. It has the same tone. And that's something I want you to keep in mind, because when you signed up for this webinar, one of the descriptions that we put out there said, hey, in today's job market, you need to be a triple threat. You can't just have a great resume and cover letter anymore. Now you need to be able to communicate your personal brand on paper, online, and in person. And we want to make sure that's a consistent message, so that no matter where an employer is looking for you or how they find you, when they talk to you in person, when they read about you online, or they look at your resume, they're getting this one consistent look and feel. Does that make sense? So what I'm doing on this slide right here is breaking that down for you, on paper, online, in person. We're going to look at resumes and specifically submitting job applications. What does your online presence need to look like? And how are you pitching yourself? How are you taking that brand and communicating it when you're first meeting people, both from a networking perspective, but also from an interview perspective? You can basically apply similar principles. So let's dig in. All right. there's something that's incredibly important, and most people like to kind of skip over this and just start updating their resume or jumping into the job search. And as a career coach, I always go back and say, okay, but what's the goal? What's the goal? So what I'm going to really emphasize here is that if you're not too sure what you want to do next in your career, you need to take a little time and do that soul searching now, because your goals are going to be the foundation of your job search and how you define and communicate your brand. When you think about it, in the job search process, you're going to look for job leads. You're going to prioritize your existing network of connections and then identify who you should be getting connected with next. You're going to look for opportunities both online and in person to network with people. You're going to be customizing your resume, updating your LinkedIn profile. All of these require you to have a specific goal in mind, because it's going to help you prioritize your activities and also help you identify what should you be highlighting on your different personal branding materials, your advertising campaign, and what do you actually want to downplay or not shine as much light on because it's not as relevant given your current goals. And so for those of you out there who already have a very clear understanding of your goals, excellent, write them down. I will encourage everybody, when you have a goal in mind, write it down. And if you are to get that type of position, either in your next role or 3 roles down the line, if it's a longer plan, what would success look like? What would that role look like? What would that company be like? Write it down, because you're 10 times more likely to accomplish your goals when you write them down. And particularly add those details in. It will keep you going when the job search drags you down, because anybody who's ever searched for a job knows it's not fun. It's a roller coaster. So what I want to do now is go through a few job search exercises, and I'm going to ask the team who's managing over the chat box while I'm talking if they could also, in a minute or two, share a link to additional exercises, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on that today. I really want to get more into the personal branding, but I want to make sure that anyone whose goals are still a little unclear has the resources they need to help better define them. So at a very high level, these are 3 exercises. The links that we're going to provide, or the one link, is going to give you access to 4 exercises plus an additional 3. So there's a bunch of different ways you can go about it. You do not have to do all of these. I would say pick and choose the ones that appeal to you. Some of these work more with the left-brainers than the right-brainers, but do what makes most sense given you and your circumstance, and then look at your results and share them with other people and get their insights. Sometimes you need somebody who's not as closely tied to your profession to help you see the woods through the trees through the woods, whatever that analogy is, that metaphor. So starting with a personal SWOT analysis, anybody who went to business school or majored in business even for their undergrad is probably very familiar with this concept of SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Now you're going to think about it for you personally and for the career that you're targeting in your next role. What are your greatest strengths? And what are the areas for improvement? This will help you decide, do I really want a job that's going to, force me to rely on something that I'm not that great at? I will say there's a difference between being great at something and liking what you're doing. And so it's not just about what are you great at, but what are you great at and passionate about? Where are there areas where there are either skills, I wouldn't even say it's weaknesses, it might just be you don't like doing it, put it in that column. What opportunities or threats do you face currently at work or in your industry? Are certain things becoming obsolete? Are different technologies coming in and disrupting your existing industry? Are there any changes going on, in the environment, in the political climate that has some effect on your work and where you want to go next? Write those down. Billboard Top Hits is one of my favorite ones. It's brainstorm your proudest moments. Ideally, they should be something related to work. It could also be while you were volunteering, while you were in school. But think about what are the things you've done that you're most proud of, and get 5. You can make a huge list, but boil it down to the 5 that you feel most proud of, and really ask yourself why. What was the circumstance behind that? What was the environment like? Did you raise your hand and volunteer to be a part of this, or did you initiate a certain project or task, or was it assigned to you? Were you working independently, or were you collaborating with a group? What was the nature of the work? What were the skills you were using? What were the core values that drove the project or the task? If you can start brainstorming that information out, you're going to get some really interesting stuff to look at. And I'm actually going to look at this exercise and the next one together, because there's something you can do with both of them. For the employment review, make a list of every role you've ever held: part-time, full-time, permanent, temporary, internship, volunteer experience. Get it all down on paper. Just make a list and then put 2 columns next to that. And in one column, write down in very, very specific detail, what did you like about that job and what didn't you like about that job in the other column. And it could be the boss, the work environment, the nature of the work, the pay, whatever it was. Get very specific, do a little soul searching. And ideally, the second and third exercise here, both of these will allow you to kind of take a step back, look at the information, and look for the themes. What are you seeing, or what is completely absent? Because that's just as important. Is there a love of nature, helping people? Is it working in a corporate environment, or being independent and being your own boss? Whatever it is, start looking for those themes, because that will help crystallize your goals. And again, the link that I believe they've shared or will be sharing now will take you to an article where there's a lot more exercises that you can go through. When you're looking at all of these exercises, at the end of the day, you're trying to boil it down to, what are the skills that I want to be using in my next role? What are the core values that I want to drive the work that I'm doing? And what's the right work environment for me where I thrive? And when you can put those together, it's going to help you have a clearer understanding of the types of companies you want to work for and the types of roles you want to pursue. Because ultimately, whatever the answers are to those 3 different areas, that's going to help you define your brand. As you're communicating who you are and what you do and what you're passionate about, you want it to speak to whatever type of job you want to do next. Your brand could be a lot of different things, but you want it to be focused on wherever you're trying to get next in your career. Your brand has to align with whatever that goal is. All right, so now that we've gone over the basics, I want to talk about, once you have that clearer idea, once you feel more comfortable about who you are and what strengths you want to highlight to prospective employers, networking connections, let's talk about how you translate that into the different materials in your advertising plan. Again, think of these personal branding materials. It's your advertising campaign. And we're going to start with paper, then we're going to go online, and then we're going to talk about what that looks like face-to-face. So I would like to start with a poll as we go into the resume fun. And my question for you is, how long do you think the average recruiter spends reviewing a resume? How long do you think they're spending reviewing your resume when you submit it? I'm going to give it, we're almost there. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, let's look at these results together. Okay, so for those of you who said 30 to 90 seconds, that's what we'd hope, right? It makes sense. I think there's a nice split here. I'm really surprised to see so many people in the 6-second category, but it's there for a reason. Believe it or not, the sad truth is, yeah, 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're done. Where does this number come from? You know, it's very popular. You hear it all the time. There's a company called The Ladders. It's a job board that I actually work ago. And when I worked there, we did an eye tracking study where we looked to see how are recruiters reviewing resumes online. And we sat and we were tracking their eye movement. And funny enough, the most important or compelling data point we gleaned from that entire experiment was how short the amount of time they were spending reviewing each resume. Now, funny enough, when we asked them, they said they spent 1 to 2 minutes on average reviewing every resume. But we actually timed them unbeknownst to them, and on average they were spending about 6 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean if they like you and they think you would be a good fit for the role that they're not going to spend more time, but they're doing a 6-second skim of your resume to see, are you a fit or not? Should you be thrown into the trash pile, or should you be set aside to look at more closely? And so when you think about it, you've got 6 seconds to make the right impression. And that's assuming your resume has made it through one of those awful ATS systems. It's a piece of software that reads your resume, parses the information, ranks it based on certain keywords, and then basically sends the ones that rank highest over to the recruiter that then spends the whole 6 seconds reviewing your resume. So I know that's a little depressing, but that's why I'm here. I'm going to tell you how we can get past that. Okay, whenever you're looking at a job description, and what I recommend doing, especially if you're starting your job search, is take 3 to 5 job listings, and I go old school, I'd say print them out, but take 3 to 5 job listings that are all centered around a similar goal. I don't care where they're located. At this point, we're looking for meaty job descriptions that describe the type of role that you feel you're qualified for and you want to pursue next. And take a look at them. You can print them out, you can just look at them online, but what I want you to do is look for what are the terms that are routinely popping up on every job description you look at. There will be themes. If your goals are fairly clear, when you're looking at a number of similar job descriptions, the same terms are going to routinely pop up. And the idea is to highlight all of those terms, put a check mark next to all the ones that you possess, and make sure that exact language is incorporated into your resume. It's not just synonyms of that or other ways of saying that. You want to use that language. And so there's always this idea of this best practice that you need to customize your resume for every job application. And the one thing I want to warn people against is it's not this dramatic overhaul of your resume every time you submit an application. My goodness, it would take you forever. That's not the idea here. If your goals are fairly clear, it's a slight tweaking. It's almost an evolution of the resume. It may be a swapping out of a few terms to make sure that you're using the ones that match whatever you're seeing in the job description. Because chances are, if they're in the job description, that's what the ATS system is using to rank you by, and that's probably what that entry-level sourcer or HR coordinator is using as their criteria when they do an initial scan before they send your application over to either a hiring manager or a more senior recruiter who has a better sense of what the role really entails and how your experience would fit into that role. So what you see here is a job description. This is a sample one that we mocked up that you'd see on recruiter.com. Again, great place to look for jobs. But this is one spot where I just started highlighting some of the relevant words that you see popping up everywhere. And it's not a surprise. A director of marketing communications is going to have the word marketing and communications and strategy and strategic, and lots of stuff about writing and verbal skills and oral and presentation, verbal. It's not a surprise that these are the terms you're seeing. I think people forget that when they're thinking about how they want to describe their experience or what they've already done, they should really look back on what are the job descriptions that they're targeting now and rip some of the sentences and some of those keywords straight from the job description. So when you're focusing on crafting a resume for a specific job, really focus on what are the qualifications and the requirements that they're spelling out. Some of these job descriptions, can be a ridiculously long laundry list, wish list, for lack of a better term, of everything they could possibly want in a candidate. And I don't want you to get too sidetracked by that. Focus on what's required. Look at some of the desired stuff because, hey, if you have it, definitely you want to highlight it. But what's most important are what are the core requirements for this role? What type of person are they looking for? What language are they using to describe that? And how can you translate that and put that into your resume to show that that's who you are? So always focus on the requirements of the job position, and then use that to reflect in your resume your qualifications, and then the results you've been able to create as a result of possessing whatever skills and experience they want. That's incredibly important. If you're having trouble identifying which are the terms that are routinely popping up, particularly when you're looking at a number of job descriptions, or you don't want to do it old school, as I would suggest, and print them out and play with a highlighter, another easy way to do it is to use a word cloud. They're free, they're online. I did it this morning to double check and make sure it worked. There's one called Tag Crowd. There's also another called Wordle. I tried out Tag Crowd, it worked just fine. You can just copy and paste a bunch of job descriptions into a field and say, yeah, give me a visualization of what that looks like. You can ask it to remove terms such as and the silly filler words that you clearly don't want to pop up, and really get down to the meat of what are the terms that are constantly reinforced throughout the job description that you need to translate and basically plant in your resume. And this is an example of a resume. This is a mid-level one. So perhaps Alex would be going after this role because he's a senior Marcom manager at the moment, and perhaps he's reaching for that director level position. I'd actually recommend that he then changes that highlighted title, senior marketing communications manager, to director, so that it's very clear what role he's going after, or maybe just senior marketing communications professional, and that leaves it a little open because you know a director at one company could be equivalent to a senior manager or even a manager or even a VP at another one. So that's another way that you can work that in. Looking at this resume, and we will have a link shared in the chat window at some point. It's also, I know that I have it scheduled to tweet out from the hashtag #PlanYourBrand. But there's another sample of a mid-level one you can look at, and we also have other samples on our site that you can check out. But a few things I wanted to point out about this example, starting from the very top and working our way down. First, if you have a credential that's considered a really great selling point for your industry, don't wait and hope that the recruiter finds it at the bottom of your resume. Because if you're not entry level, your education's at the bottom now. Put the acronym at the top. So whether you're an RN or you have a PMP, you have your MBA, if that's considered incredibly valuable in the field you're pursuing, make sure it's at the top so they can't miss it. Use this professional title at the very top of your resume to clearly explain to anybody who quickly glances at this resume, this is what I'm about, this is my goal. Again, as your brand, this is your mission. Then there's a paragraph that kind of sums up your qualifications. Think of that as the elevator pitch that's on your resume. Give them a list of your core competencies. Again, this is a great place where you can swap terms in and out based upon the job description to make sure that you're getting past those initial digital gatekeepers and that you're summing up the skills that we know they're looking for. Now, just stating it there is one thing. In your professional experience section, you actually need to prove that you possess those skills by explaining what projects have you contributed to or what results have you brought about as a result of possessing those skills or taking on a role that requires you to do those things. That's incredibly important. Another thing to notice about this resume is that it's got a very clean look to it. It's easy to quickly scan. And remember, the format of your resume is just as important as the content itself, because if it looks like an eye chart, if you have endless rows of bullets or huge blocks of text, nobody's going to read that in 6 seconds. Their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to pass you on. So you need to keep those things in mind, that there is something to be said for the visual layout of your resume. Also, we know that recruiters look for information in certain spots. That's why I prefer this type of format versus some of the more creative ones, which, yes, may catch someone's eye, but if they can't find the key pieces of information they want quickly, they may just pass over it. I talk about creating a snapshot with the top third. Think about this the same as we talk about the top of a newspaper. We talk about the top of a web page, what you see above the fold. It's very similar. Everything above professional experience, that's that top third snapshot. A recruiter should be able to glance at that and know what are you targeting and why are you qualified to target that very quickly. That's the goal behind it. And again, use bullets sparingly throughout your resume. Use them to call attention to specific details. I always say that bullet points equal bragging points. So always keep in mind that when you're using a bullet point, it's because you want to call attention to something. So if you bullet point everything, everything's important, people's eyes glaze over, they're going to miss it. And something, of course, that I forgot to mention earlier, the LinkedIn profile is on here. Almost every profession these days, if you are in any professional setting, it's expected that you have a LinkedIn profile, and you want to make sure it's on your resume because we know they're going to look for it anyway. You don't want them confusing you with someone else. You want them to make sure they find you because they're looking to see if what you're putting on your resume is backed up online and it shows this one consistent person. This is the second half of this person's resume, and the only thing I really wanted to point out is that as long as you're past entry level, education and professional development or technical proficiencies tend to go at the end. If you're in IT, your technical proficiencies are probably up at the top of your resume because that's one of your biggest selling points. In something where you're in marketing or sales or finance, it's going to go to the bottom. It's not as important. But keep that in mind that things move to different parts of your resume based on what's considered your best selling points. When you're entry level, your shiny new degree is probably the most important thing that you can really market, along with hopefully some relevant internships and some, group activities in school that helped round you out. Once you're past entry level, they care about what you've been doing most recently in really the last 3 years or 3 to 6 years at most, and that's where the focus is going to be on really fleshing out that part of your resume. Further back in your career, less details get added. Okay, moving along to online. We've talked a little bit about resume. I know we could talk about that all day long, but that is only one component of your personal brand. So let's talk about how do you translate that online. This is our last poll of the day. Get ready. Keep you on your toes. Go 1, 2, 3. And this is a really honest question. How often do you Google your name? And funny enough, at TopResume, we recently ran this exact same poll with our members to see what are people doing. So I'm going to give it a little more time because I'd really love to get everybody's answer on this one and get a better sense of what's going on. 3, 2, 1. Left hand? All right. So almost a quarter of you have never ever Googled your name, and then a really large portion of you are doing it 1 to 3 times a year. And that's not actually, to be quite honest, this was better than when we did our poll. We found that just over 50% of people who polled, and we polled almost 2,000 people, had never ever Googled their name. And then we had another 33% who had Googled it, 1 to 3 times per year. And that was really where, more than 80% of everyone polled ended up. Let me close that. All right. So why is this important and why do I even ask about this? Well, it's because Googling your name is part of managing your personal brand, because part of your personal brand is your online brand. And why has this become so important? Well, yeah, I would like you to do this once a month, and I'll get into why I think it's so important that you need to do this at least once a month, because studies have shown, and this is a stat that I got from JobSite, studies have shown that 93% of recruiters are going to Google your name and look at your social media profiles before they invite you in for an interview. So it's not even before they're going to ask you if you want the job, though a lot of them will wait until they've already interviewed you and then they're doing a little bit of extra checking. A large portion of them are going to check this out before they even invite you in for an interview because they want to know what else is out there about you. So if you're not Googling your name and you don't know what they're seeing, A, you can't manage it, you can't try and fix it, and B, if there are certain things you can't fix, you need to be aware that they're out there and that a recruiter might stumble upon them, so you're prepared with a response should they ask about it. Because the last thing you want to do is be caught off guard when you go in for an interview, or find out that you've been sabotaging your job search and you had no idea why. I remember a client many years ago who was having an awful time because he was, John Smith Sr. and his son was John Smith Jr., City and State, and Sr. had no online brand, and his son had quite an online brand, and let's just say it did not align with Senior's goals and lifestyle, and he was running up against a lot of issues, and he had to, have his son change some things up and build his own brand to combat some of that. So let's talk about what in the world that means and how you can start, taking stock of your online brand and then building it up. The first thing I'd ask everyone to do, if you haven't done this already, is make a list of every single social media account you've ever created. And I don't know if you're like me, I have ones that I haven't touched in years. I have no idea what they look like. I'm not even too sure of the password. I'd have to dig. But it's really important that you make a list of what you have out there. And then, especially for the ones that you're using on a regular basis, you have to make a decision. Do I want to reserve this only for personal use, where I want to post all the pictures of my kids and my dog and that sort of thing, and talk politics and whatever it is? Or do I want to use this to help support my professional brand and help boost my job search? And there are there are plenty of articles. If you go on TopResume.com and click on career advice, we have plenty of articles around social media and how to use social media for your job search, both from a personal branding perspective as well as other tactics, looking for job opportunities and that sort of thing. If you decide that you want to use an account just for personal use, change the name on it. Use a nickname and your last name, or use middle name and last name. Use something that's not going to be associated with the name that's on your resume. And that's something to bring up. When it comes to branding, don't assume you have to suddenly use your proper formal name. If you go by Mike, use Mike. You don't have to use Michael. But whatever you choose to do, just be consistent on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, on any material that's going to be related to your job search and your professional brand. Just be consistent in how you represent your name. And then for anything that you do want to be using, obviously we want to align it with the resume. And so we're going to talk specifically about what that means for LinkedIn. Something else I'd recommend doing while you're at it, run that Google search, see where your name is popping up. You might want to try Googling your name with parentheses around it, or quotation marks actually. Try quotation marks actually. You might want to set up a Google News alert. If you Google News Alert, it will take you to a page where you can set up searches for your name, for even a target company if you want to keep an eye on it, and then you can receive daily, weekly, monthly updates on what's coming out that has your name or that company's name in it. That's a great way to actively and regularly monitor your brand without feeling like it's this, task that's always on your to-do list. Again, I recommend Googling your name once a month, and then if you have an interview coming up, I would do a quick search that day just to see what's there, just in case, so you're prepared. But I would also ask you to make a list of where have you uploaded your resume, or where have you created some sort of bio or profile for yourself other than social media. Do you have a Medium account? Are you on any alumni or professional networks where they have a directory? What job boards are you using? When was the last time you updated your resume on those sites? If they're job boards that you don't want to use for this current search, remove your old resume, close down that account. If you do want to use that job board or any of those other areas, make sure that everything's up to date. So again, it's a consistent message of who you are today, what's your work experience like, and what are your job goals. How am I doing on speed? Has anybody asked me to slow down? All right, we've got, I'm thinking we may have some East Coasters on the line. Thank you. All right, sample LinkedIn profile. I'm not going to sit here and pick apart every single little detail. We do have some links that can be shot your way that I provided the team to help you, particularly with your the summary on your LinkedIn profile, and also understanding the differences between LinkedIn and your resume, because there are subtle differences. Here are the things I'd like you to keep in mind in terms of what should be consistent. Your name should be consistent. Your credentials. If you're highlighting your credentials at the top of your resume, you should highlight them at the top of your LinkedIn profile. You can see the way I did it. I incorporated them into my job title directly below my name. Some people put it right after their name. Both works. Your work experience, your education and your work history, they need to be consistent. The dates need to be the same, the company names need to be the same, and at least a short blurb in LinkedIn about what you've done and the results you've created, that should just be consistent. So you just want to make sure you're updating that on a regular basis. Those are the things that, bare bones, those things need to be the same. Now, the biggest difference between something like LinkedIn versus your resume is that your resume is pretty cut and dry, pretty black and white. It doesn't have a lot of personality. You know, there is some debate in the resume writing community, but most agree you don't put pronouns. You don't say I, me, we, anything like that on your resume. It's very cut and dry. It's what we call absent first person. You just don't include the pronouns whatsoever. And you can see that in the sample on the previous slides or in the example that was shared in the chat room. When it comes to your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn is a social media network. And that means that it's a bit more social. And so what I do like about creating a LinkedIn profile is that you get to show a little bit more of your personality, and you get to provide the viewer with a little bit more of a 360-degree view of you as a professional and a human being. So for instance, you can put your picture here. Unless you have a CV and you're only submitting applications overseas, a picture on a resume is still a very big no-no. But on LinkedIn, you're 40% more likely to get clicked upon if you have a picture. It just has to be the right picture. You need to look friendly, approachable, professional, as it pertains to your career. So think about how would you look if you were going to an important meeting at the type of company or work environment that you want to go in your next role, which is very different if you want very corporate, you know, institution kind of thing versus startup world. But think about how somebody at that company would dress for an important meeting. That's kind of the look and feel that you want to give you want to portray in your picture. In terms of the summary, you can use I, me, we in the summary, and actually I highly recommend it because you can have the summary from your resume in your LinkedIn profile, but just a little above that, I would add a few lines that talk more to how did you get into this line of work, what draws you into it, what keeps you going in it, why do you enjoy it. Give some sort of insight, a little look into your personality that gives the people a sense of who would they be working with and why is this person playing in this space, because you want it to exude your personality. So keep that in mind. The other ways that you can really extend your brand in your LinkedIn profile that are not necessarily as easy on something like a resume is that you have this ability to add multimedia. You can put in examples of your portfolio. You can put examples of sites you worked on, projects, products, presentations. I got a lot of P's going on there. A lot of different types of examples that show the type of work you've either contributed to or you completed on your own. I also love the idea that you can add status updates or you can write full-on blog articles on here. So everyone says, oh, you need to create this brand, you need to start a blog. I say, There is no reason to start a blog unless it is really important for your work. If you're in a very creative field, you probably have an online portfolio or a blog of some sort. If you're a writer, that's something that's pretty necessary. If you're in finance or HR, there's absolutely no reason why you should be creating your own personal blog. Find other outlets and ways where you can give visual representations that demonstrate the work that you're capable of doing and your expertise. And this is a great way where you can blog within LinkedIn and never have to create and manage your own site. So when an idea strikes you, you can publish it here and share it with your network. This is also very helpful if you're trying to establish subject matter expertise in a particular area. I'm looking to see if there's anything else I missed here. The one thing I would also point out, if you look on the upper right-hand side, there's something that says Amanda's profile, and it shows my LinkedIn profile. And you'll notice that it's not a stream of letters and numbers, which is the norm when you just create a profile on LinkedIn. Mine is customized. That's 100% free. Everybody can do it. Actually, I don't know if one of the ladies from TopResume can look up that article on how to customize your LinkedIn profile URL, but it's actually really simple. You can customize your URL. That can go on your resume. It can go on your business card, so it looks neater. But this is yet another way to reinforce your brand. And what I recommend doing is either using some combination of words, either your name and something to do with who you are as a professional. Job Search Amanda is also my Twitter handle, so it's not a surprise. I also wanted to use it for my LinkedIn profile. But if you don't want to go that route, you can always use your name, but something that describes you and relates back to what you do for a living. We already talked about multimedia, so I'm not going to go into this any deeper, but you can see I have a bunch of different versions up here. So underneath my work with TopResume, I have a video of a success story from one of our happy customers. I have an attachment for one of my checklists. I have an example of another webinar I've done specifically for college students. So, and there's more in there. It's a whole slideshow, different things you can look at. But I'm giving everyone a sample of various different mediums that demonstrate my expertise and different things I've done. So think of it that way. What could you add that would help bring some life and a bit more personality to your LinkedIn profile in ways that your resume really can't do it? Again, this totally supports anything you'd see on my resume, but this is a different flavor. High level, these are other things you can do that are going to help continually evolve and build out your online brand, particularly when it has to do with LinkedIn. So one, there's a spot where you can list your top skills and then you can request endorsements from people. There's also a separate section where you can request recommendations, and the recommendations are more like a referral or an actual written recommendation that you used to get. You know, at least for me, it was when I was back in school and you'd get a recommendation from your counselor before you went to college, that sort of thing. You don't see them as much. I would say half the employers I've ever asked for are like, oh, well, you know, tell me what you want me to write and I'll write it up. So in a lot of instances, you can help really define what's going to be highlighted about you. And again, what's your brand? What skills do you want these people to emphasize? What are the softer skills you want them to emphasize that are harder to demonstrate on a resume or LinkedIn profile? This is the way you can do that. Get these real life statements from customers, from supervisors, from colleagues, from people who you've managed, so that people get a better sense of all these little softer skills about your leadership qualities or your creativity, things that may be a little bit more challenging to quantify and produce result-driven, bullets on that resume. In terms of the skill endorsements, I used to always think it was kind of BS because it's like anybody could recommend you or endorse you for any skill, and it had nothing, anybody can endorse anyone for anything, and that drove me insane. But what I have learned is that when recruiters are searching on LinkedIn for candidates, they can search by that field. And so whatever skills are most important and most closely tied to your current job goals, those are the skills that you want to be at the top of your list and you want the most endorsements for. So you do have the ability to customize which endorsements are at the top, and you can manage the scales a little bit and tip the scales in your favor by requesting endorsements for specific skills because they speak to what you want to do next. So that's another way. I'm sure this is no surprise since so many of you are coming from recruiter.com, and they have such an amazing network of LinkedIn groups, but joining relevant LinkedIn groups and actively participating is also a personal branding tactic. It's not just about, you meeting other people, though the networking component, of course, is amazing there, but it's also about sharing, something you've written, sharing an article you've found. If somebody has a discussion going on, when you have a point of view on something, actually putting that out there and engaging in that conversation. There are a few reasons I find this to be very important. One, again, these are other ways outside of a traditional resume, a traditional LinkedIn summary that can demonstrate your expertise and level of knowledge. But also, we know recruiters tend to try and stalk these groups. I have a lot of friends that are in the recruiting industry, surprise, surprise, and I always knew when they switched companies or were suddenly recruiting for a different function or field, because all their LinkedIn groups would suddenly change overnight, because they'd suddenly switch to groups where they thought they'd find candidates, because they're always looking for passive candidates. So keep in mind that these are opportunities to get your brand out there beyond just applying for a job and hoping someone finds your LinkedIn profile online. And the one thing I'm going to put out there, and this is more of a career coaching, it may not be as much personal branding, but I think it is. Whenever you connect to anyone, please, 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 please always send a message along with that connection request. Always tailor your message. Don't ever just hit the button and let it send. Why? Well, A, it is a personal branding opportunity that you're missing out on. Two, particularly if it's not someone you know very well, you want to remind them as to why should they be connecting with you. Where did you meet? When have you spoken? When did you engage with one another? Why should they, sit there and connect with you? And also, when you're searching your network, months later, and this person's name pops up and you find out they work for the company you're suddenly very interested in, you're going to want to try and jog your memory and theirs as to how you guys know one another, and you can look at what your connection request message was, use that as an opportunity to jog your memory in the future. And these are some of the most popular groups from recruiter.com on LinkedIn. So if any of these appeal to you, I believe the team's going to also send out links in the chat room specifically to these. These are a few of a very, very long list that recruiter.com does such a great job of managing over. But if one of these makes sense to you, please check it out if you haven't already. Okay, now that we've talked at LinkedIn for quite a while, I'd like to move on and talk about your brand in person. And, why do we talk about this in the first place? Well, this is really tied to networking. And why has networking become such an important part of the job search process? Because not one, but at least two different studies that I've read about have found you are 10 times more likely to land the job, not just get the interview, but land the job if your job application is accompanied by a referral. 10 times more likely. When you think about it, if your resume or your career history is not that perfect straight trajectory that the recruiter's looking for, or you took a couple, curves along the path to getting towards your ultimate job, perhaps you're trying to get back into something you haven't done in a while, or you're looking to make that transition to a different career. It's hard with a straight up resume and a job application, because no matter how we, position that resume, there's always going to be a little bit that's not that perfect fit. A referral gets you past those initial gatekeepers. A referral is oftentimes your advocate, somebody who knows you, knows your work, knows what you know, and understands your level of expertise and will vouch for you. Also, not only are they going to make sure that they're only advocating you for roles where you'd be a good fit, but they probably know a thing or two about that company culture, and they can vouch that you'll be a good fit from a cultural perspective. Because there is this, Pareto's rule when it comes to recruiting that once you get past that initial phone screen, only 20% of that face-to-face interview is really going to be spent verifying you possess the right skills to do the job. 80% of that time is going to be spent making sure you're a good cultural fit for the organization. Because you could have the best skill set in the world, but if you're not going to fit in with the team and you guys aren't going to jive or you gals aren't going to jive, it's not going to work out in the end. So referrals are so incredibly important, but the only way to get these referrals is to, of course, network. You got to meet these people. And whether you love it or you loathe it, you can't ignore it anymore. Networking has become an incredibly important and vital part of the job search process. And that's why I think it's so important that we talk about this, quote unquote, elevator pitch. And I'm just going to go out there and say I think elevator pitch is the worst word in the whole wide world, and it really doesn't sum up what we're talking about, because who in the world stands in an elevator and pitches themselves on a regular basis? It's ridiculous. It's outdated. Not to mention, the traditional elevator pitch was always positioned as this 30 to 45-second spiel about yourself. Frankly, given today's marketplace and the attention spans of people, particularly, how many of you are sitting on your phone right now while you're watching this webinar? How many of you are trying to write an email while you're listening to this? We're multitaskers, and we don't have very long attention spans. So instead of this 30 to 45-second pitch, think of it as a micro pitch, 15 seconds. And really, the way that I like to think about it is that it's the amuse-bouche to the conversation. It's the little taste they give you at the beginning of a meal to whet your appetite. You want to give them your tagline. What's that one statement that they need to know about you that will whet their appetite? And then, once you've done that, you want to gauge their interest to determine how much more information should you be providing, because you want it to be a conversation. As with anything to do with networking, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you want to follow that ratio. You want to listen twice as much as you speak. So you want to provide your little tagline. You want to have a conversation going, but you also want to give them the opportunity to speak. So let's talk about what in the world this personal branding statement or this tagline should be. These are the questions that I want you to ask yourself. Take a piece of paper, get out a Google Doc or a Word doc, and write out these questions and ask yourself, what am I great at? This is actually, a lot of this is similar to the SWOT analysis from the job goal exercise earlier. What am I great at? Looking at my track record, at work and outside of work, what are the things that I do really well? What are the skills that I excel in? Where is my subject matter expertise? What do I know very well? What am I great at and passionate about? Because again, you can be great at a lot of things, doesn't mean you want to do them for a living. So look at that list and refine it and say, well, which of these things do I really enjoy doing? Yes, no job is going to be 100% of everything what you want to do every minute of the day, but you'd like at least 80% of your job to be stuff that you enjoy. Why are you qualified for the role you're pursuing? You know what you're passionate about. You know what skills you have. Well, what else is there? Is it the industry experience you've gained? Does it have to do with you understand that customer, or you know that field very well? Is it the certifications, the professional development, your track record? Whatever it is, why are you qualified to pursue this type of work? And then how can you add value? So instead of looking at what you've already done, what are you capable of doing? If you can answer these questions, you're going to write out paragraphs. And I do recommend jotting a bunch of stuff down and keep refining it until you have this small little paragraph. And then I'd share it with friends or family or colleagues or whoever you trust, and help, use them, leverage them to boil that down to a single statement. For instance, I consider my tagline, say, hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a certified professional career coach and resume writer, and my passion is helping people find the right job sooner. When you think about it, it's one statement. It gives why I'm qualified to do what I do, what's the end results that I'm able to deliver, and what am I excited about. Some people, I look at my husband. My husband's an efficiency nut. It's all, some people would say, he's trying to rush, but really he is looking for the critical path in absolutely everything he does in his life. And when he's talking to people, he's always talking about how he's striving to find the best way to get the best results with the least amount of inefficiencies, the least amount of wasted resources. That's where his head goes. That's where his personal branding statement goes. That's where we would take the direction of his tagline. So you've got to think about it, because it's not just what you do, but it takes those unique abilities, that differentiation we talked about a while back, and puts it to the forefront of the statement. The one thing I keep in mind is this is a one-liner, right? And once you're done with that one-liner, And then you're going to continue talking based on gauging the level of interest of the other person. If you were sitting down for an interview, this would be how you perhaps start out your tell me about yourself answer in the interview situation. And again, that would be an extended version. You're talking about a 2-minute version versus a 15 or a 45-second version of this pitch. One thing to keep in mind is that you want to modify it for the audience and the occasion. And by that I mean, if you're at a bar around the corner with friends of friends, you're probably not going to talk in technical jargon that only people in your industry understand. If you are at an industry-specific networking event, you can throw out every acronym you want because you know the person listening is going to understand it. So you always want to speak in terms that you know your audience will understand. Does that make sense? All right, I hope you're all nodding your heads at home. All right, before we jump into Q&A, the one thing I want to remind everybody to do, if you haven't done it already, is go over to that sidebar, look in the section that says handouts, and make sure you download a copy of the personal branding checklist, because it's going to take everything I talked about today and it's going to break it down into further detail, as well as provide you with a ton of links to give you additional resources and tips to help you really clean up your personal brand so you're ready to kick that job search butt. For anybody who is listening to this as a recording, there's also a link where you can, that should have been in the email for the recording of this webinar, where you can download it. And for anybody who's listening in now, I'm going to ask if somebody on the team could also just share that one link that we had in the Google Doc. You can share that link with anyone, and your friends and family and colleagues can also download the checklist for free. That's our gift to you. I want to thank you for listening to me ramble for a period of time. Again, my name is Amanda Augustine, career advice expert for TopResume. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, the Gram, all the different social media accounts. But if you're looking for more career advice, feel free to reach out to topresume.com for a free review, or to click the career advice button to access all of our advice. I'd love to open it up to Q&A now. The one thing I'm going to mention is that should we run out of time, because I know I'm a talker, I do want to say you can always go back to the Facebook page. At the very, very top of this slide you're looking at, there's a bit.ly link so that you don't have to go hunting for it. But on recruiter.com, on my Amanda Augustine Facebook page, as well as on TopResume, you can go to this event. If you post your question in the next few hours, I will work through getting all these answers out as soon as possible. I'm going to dedicate a chunk of time tomorrow. So again, if we run out of time and we don't get to your question, you can go to this page and post your question, and I'll work through those answers as soon as I can. At this point, I'd love to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Amanda. So let's see. We have our first question is from Ellen Carter. And she wants to know, does it ever become effortless? She finds it exhausting chasing situations. Changing.
So are we talking about effortless in terms of managing the personal brand or conducting the job search? I'm going to assume personal brand, like managing over it?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I'd say it ever becomes 100% effortless. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't like to sugarcoat things, and I'm never going to lie to anybody about it. So it can be challenging. I think, though, there's a lot of work to be done up front, and that can feel incredibly time-consuming and such a pain. But once you have certain things set up, you have the foundation, I do find it becomes much easier. So for instance, yeah, you're going to have to Google your name, and you're going to have to see what's out there about yourself and understand, are there things out there that you need to push down? Do you need to create new things? And once you have a better sense and you've kind of done that initial work, you set up a Google News alert for yourself, and that will help you. You Google it once a month when you have time, on the train, when you have a spare minute and you're playing on your phone, and it shouldn't be something that's so time-consuming. The one part that I would say can be so time consuming is if you're trying to maintain active social media accounts. So I talked about LinkedIn, but I know many of you out there are using Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and God knows what else to project your brand. My best advice would be choose one or two. Don't do them all. You can't maintain them all on a regular basis. It's exhausting. I mean, companies have social media managers whose sole role is to manage over a calendar of content and actively manage all of those different accounts. It's a full-time job. And we already know that the job search on its own is a full-time job. So what I would recommend is pick the ones that seem to make the most sense given what you do for a living and just maintain those. You don't need to post every single day to LinkedIn. You want to, set aside an hour once a week to check in on it. I think that's the biggest thing is you need to set restrictions for yourself. How much time am I spending on a certain activity and how frequently am I doing it? And then reassess every month or so to see, is this worth it for me? I would say for any job search tactic, any job search tactic in general, the jobs you're applying to, the resume you've updated, whatever that is, I'd say give it a good 3 months before you throw in the towel. But when it comes to managing your personal brand, you've got to figure out where you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. So test everything out for a bit of time and then decide what you should move forward with and what you maybe want to scale back or remove.
Oh, thank you. That's a great explanation. So our next question is from Paul Ambrose. And this could be directed at either Amanda or Miles. And he wants to know, how does he get recommendations on LinkedIn? Does he just ask?
I'm happy to take it, but Miles, I would love for you to chime in because I have a feeling your expertise in LinkedIn is probably many levels above my own. Would you like to chime in for this one?
Yeah, I'll try. There's no real secret to it. I would say you do have to ask for it. I would say the best way to do it is more of a kind of a reciprocal kind of arrangement. Like if you recommend other people, they're more likely to recommend you. And so you want to do sort of like a give and take, right? So if you are very active on LinkedIn and then you're connecting with your friends and colleagues and people you know who are at companies you want to be employed at, you want to actually recommend them, and it's another point that basically pings them and reminds them that you're around, and it's a nice intro to ask for a recommendation or further connect with them. So I guess that's my quick point on that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I try and avoid the tit for tat where I'll write one for you and you write one for me because I think that dilutes it a little bit. But I think if you show that you're actively recommending other people, that you tend to make it easier to get recommendations as well. One tactic that I've always recommended is that when you take on a new role, or you take on new responsibilities, that's when you maybe ask for a recommendation. It's the same thing as soon as you get a new job, that's when you update your LinkedIn profile. You don't wait until later. Same thing with recommendations. If you complete a great project or you just worked with a client who's incredibly happy, you make it part of your process in your communication where you say, I would love if you'd share your feedback. It's great if somebody already emailed you something and you're literally just putting it in quotation marks and emailing it back to them and saying, would you mind sharing this on LinkedIn, and you give them the link. I think you got to make it as easy as humanly possible. I find that a lot of people are willing to give you LinkedIn recommendations, assuming you're asking the right people, but nobody wants to take the time to write it. So the more that you can help steer them and say, I was hoping you could specifically talk maybe about how I worked on this project with you, or something in the roles I've been pursuing, they really want to know about my leadership abilities. If you could give a couple lines specifically about that, I'd really appreciate it. So the more that you can make it easy for them, the more likely you are to get those recommendations.
One other point, somebody brought up a question, and I answered it privately about does the 6-second rule apply to LinkedIn as well. And I don't have the study behind this, but I'm pretty sure it does because I've been around enough recruiters and been a recruiter myself. So the same thing applies. It has to be very focused. You have to make it easy on the recruiters who are and other folks who are looking at your LinkedIn profile. And so when it comes to recommendations and skills, the same thing applies. You don't want to be recommended for skills that are not relating to the job you want. You want to make sure it's very focused and that you are looking at your next step and that your LinkedIn profile looks like you fit the next step in your career.
And we have a follow-up question in regards to this, and they want to know, how do you recommend other people on LinkedIn?
I can take that. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Minda.
I was just going to say, I believe, and I'm not looking at the screen in front of me, but if you go to their profile, there's a drop-down menu where you could connect with somebody, send them a message, and I believe one of the options is also to write a recommendation for them.
Yep, and just know, just to clarify something, if people haven't used LinkedIn too much, there are recommendations and then that are full text, like you can write a paragraph about somebody, and then there are just quick skill sort of thumbs up, and those are two different things, and you can have both on your profile.
Yeah, you definitely want to blend of both. The one thing I think of is that the core competency section on your resume, it should mirror the top skills you're asking for endorsements for on your LinkedIn profile. So again, a way to make sure that everything's aligning. LinkedIn will probably have more, since you probably swap some in and out on your resume to customize it for a particular job. But the top ones are pretty much the same on both spots.
Thank you. One other question before we run out of time, I think. We have a question from Rachel Pruitt, and she wants to know, how do you feel about like infographic resumes, for instance, creating it on Canva?
So you are not the first person to ask me this question, and I'm sure you won't be the last. I am not the biggest fan of highly graphic, super creative resumes. And there's a couple of reasons. I think you can have one, but you still need the traditional resume. I guess that's the short answer. Because if you're applying to jobs online and you're going through an applicant tracking system with which a large percentage of companies use to manage their applicants, that infographic is going to get scrambled and you're going to get passed over because it's just not going to be read by a traditional applicant tracking system, unfortunately. So you may want a version of that. It's a really fun, creative thing that you're maybe emailing to people, or you have it on your portfolio, or that sort of thing, but you still need the traditional version for sure. I also find that sometimes with the infographics, it's a lot of subjective stuff. There's actually a really funny video, and I don't know if either of the people on my team can find the video that I did with Business Insider where I critiqued resumes, because I did one that was particularly, I actually was critiquing a lot of creative professionals' resumes, and a lot of them would have, images of the logos of the skills they possess with dots next to them. And I'm like, it's subjective. What does that mean? Are you proficient? Are you an expert? I don't know what that means, and neither will the recruiter. You don't want to make them have to decipher something. The other thing I'd say is that if you're creative, make sure that you spend more time funneling that creativity into your online portfolio, because that's going to be such an important part of your resume. And the link to that portfolio must be on your resume, must be on your LinkedIn profile. But there's a couple, I've actually answered this a couple times. If you go on TopResume and you search for the hashtag resume refresh chat, I did a blurb about it there. And I also, if you look for me on Quora, I also recently responded with a bunch of links specifically around this. We do have an article, though, on TopResume's career advice section that talks specifically about if you're hard set on a creative resume, some of the do's and don'ts around that.
Yeah, I'll chime in also with, for what it's worth, with a I'm definitely not a fan of the super design creative infographic style resumes, except when that format can highlight skills that you need for the job that you're looking for. So, for example, if you are a graphic designer, it could showcase your skills in designing. If you're a salesperson or if you're an engineer, there's I think it hurts you more than helps.
And I think we might be able to squeeze in one more question. And if someone's been out of work for a while, do you suggest making note of that on the resume or the LinkedIn? For example, like the office relocated out of the state, or simply make no note of it and wait to explain it if asked?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people actually have similar questions around this idea of, if there's a period of unemployment, do I explain it? If I'm currently unemployed, how do I explain it? And the best way to go about it, because unfortunately the job search is not a very fair environment in the sense that employers tend to favor those who are currently employed. So what I would recommend doing, if it was in the past and you've had other jobs, I may put a one-liner in that says something to the effect of, if it was a sabbatical or you were taking care of an ailing relative or something like that, you might put one line in, but I really recommend not drawing attention to any of those types of things on your resume. You may, you may want to incorporate something into your cover letter, but I would be very careful about that. In this instance, where you say that the company relocated and that's the reason, what I would look to do is what can you put above your most recent role that shows that you're still actively keeping your skills sharp. If you just lost your job, it's not as big of a deal. Once it's been a few months, then the gap, or once we switch to the new year and the years are now going to be different, that's a different ballpark. I would look for, my favorite thing is look for something called skill-based volunteering. I believe there's a site called Catchafire. I don't know if one of my team can throw that in the chat window, but CATCHAFIRE. Look for opportunities. Skill-based volunteering is really great because it says, I'm great with numbers, or I'm a writer, or I'm great with sales, and you can say what your skill set is, and they will match you up with potential volunteer opportunities that will allow you to use that skill set. You don't have to get paid for a role in order to put it on your resume, regardless of your age or level of experience. All you're doing is showing what are you doing to continue to keep your skill set fresh. And that's a great way because you can show you're currently doing that. And at a quick glance, at that 6-second glance, they may not notice as much that you're unemployed at that moment. When you get into the interview process, when you get into the phone screen, that's when you would mention if they bring it up. If they don't bring it up, why bring it up? They already got you on the phone. It means they must be interested. I wouldn't bring it up unless directly asked. And I would say leverage your network because your network will help you get past some of those initial hurdles that unemployment might pose in a straight-up job application.
All right, thank you, Amanda. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar on the personal branding for the modern job seeker. If you have any other questions, please go to our Facebook event page, and Amanda will respond to your question over the next couple days. There will be a link to this Facebook event in our follow-up emails, so you will be able to access it there. It has also been posted in the chat. The email will come out within the next 24 to 48 hours, and there will be a recording of the webinar as well. And we have included a survey so we can get your thoughts and opinions on how this webinar went for you. So on behalf of TopResume and Recruiter.com and our presenters, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.